Letters to a Daughter, Letter 10, Amusements. My dear child, there is scarcely any subject on which it is more important that you should form correct notions, and in relation to which a mistaken view is of more practical and dangerous tendency than that of amusements. Many a young female who might have been an ornament to her sex and a blessing to the world has, by yielding to the dictates of a wayward inclination and setting aside the decisions of sober reason on the subject, not only rendered herself of no account in society, but clouded all her prospects for both this world and another. In contemplating this subject, I wish you to feel that you are standing at the grave of female character and hopes, and to heed the monitory voice that issues from it, charging you to beware of how you tread in the footsteps of the fallen and ruined. The grand reason why so many females have fallen victims to the love of amusement is that they have judged erroneously of the end it is designed to answer. They have taken up the opinion, and it must be acknowledged, that it has too often received the sanction even of parents, that a portion especially of early life was designed to be frittered away in idle foolish indulgences, and they are at liberty during this period to regard the gratification of the senses as an ultimate object, and to think of nothing in connection with amusements beyond the mere monetary enjoyment with which it is connected. With this impression they have asked no question with so much interest as how they may most effectually be amused, and this passion has increased by indulgence until they have acquired an utter disrelish for the sober concerns of life. Who would suppose that beings could be employed in these idle pursuits, who are designed to an immortal existence, who are accountable for the improvement of all their time, and are liable every hour to enter on and exact an eternal retribution? The only rational view of this subject is that which takes for granted our obligation to use all our faculties at all times to the best purpose. This is the first principle not only of Scripture but of reason, and it were impossible to prove that we are exempt from this obligation a single moment. By any argument which would not at the same time prove that we are always exempt from it. In other words, which would not disprove human accountability and sweep away the pillars of God's moral government. It is a command dictated by God's own Spirit that whatever we do, we should do all to His glory. And if there had been any department of human action to which this command was not designed to extend, it were impossible but that the exception should have been made. The legitimate end of amusement, therefore, is not answered in mere personal gratification, but in refreshing and invigorating the powers for the more successful discharge of duty. The constitution of the human mind is such that it will not bear to be intensely employed on the same object for a long time without interruption. The effect of an attempt to keep it thus employed would be that far less would be accomplished than might be with occasional relaxation and withal. The energies of the mind, instead of being quickened and improved, would gradually be diminished. Hence, some amusement becomes necessary in order to secure the greatest usefulness. In this view, you will perceive not only that the amusement is designed to prepare you for the discharge of duty, that is, for an attention to the graver concerns of life, but that it is itself an important part of duty, and like everything else in which you engage, ought to be subject to the direction of conscience. You have no more right to forget your accountableness, or to refuse to acknowledge God in selecting your amusements, or in yielding yourself to them, than you have when you enter the closet of sanctuary, or to engage in private or public worship. You will perceive, moreover, if the preceding remarks are correct, that the whole purpose of amusement may be answered by mere change of employment. It is by no means necessary, as the popular notion is, that the change should be from an employment that is useful to one that is useless, or even worse. But the object may be even better accomplished by a change that shall keep the mind still employed to advantage of your ordinary employment, is the only one that lays your faculties under severe to advantage. of your ordinary employment is the one that lays your faculties to a severe contribution, that to which you resort for amusement ought undoubtedly to require but moderate mental exercise, and in cases of great exhaustion from intellectual effort, it may be proper to give the mind for a season an entire dispensation from the labor of connected thought. But in all ordinary cases, you will find that in unbending form, severe exertion of mind, with reference to renewing that exertion with greater success, you need not yield to positive inaction, or to occupy yourself with anything that is trifling, but may be doing something for the benefit of yourself or your fellow creatures. If you regulate your amusements by a regard to this principle, you will find it most effectual means of redeeming time, and you will have the pleasure to reflect that even your hours of relaxation are hours of usefulness. There are several tests by which you may judge whether any particular amusement is innocent. Of course, whether it is safe and right for you to indulge in it. Inquire, for instance, whether you're engaging in it, you dare enter your closet and ask God to accompany it with His blessing. Do not think this is a superstitious suggestion. Rely on it. It is fully acknowledgement of it is fully accordant with enlightened reason and conscience. We have no right to use our faculties in any way which our Maker and Judge does not approve, and if we are conscious of using them aright, we shall at once feel our need of His blessing, and we be encouraged to supplicate it. I am well aware that it is a thought which has never entered the minds of most young persons that God should be acknowledged in their amusements, and if they have ever thought of attempting to approach this awful and glorious being, this has been a subject on which conscience has dictated petitions for forgiveness, though the idea of supplicating a blessing would seem to them little short of impiety. The reason is obviously is that the amusement in which they indulge are felt to be wrong. They are not such as will abide in the scrutiny of an enlightened conscience, much less the scrutiny of a holy God. If you dare not enter your closet and ask God to bless you in any amusement in which you are about to engage, you may safely take it as a testimony of conscience against it, and if you do not retreat, you may make up your mind to encounter the lashes of conscience hereafter as part of your retribution for disobeying her suggestions. Equally certain is it that it cannot be right to engage in any amusement which is fitted to give you a disrelish for serious reflection. All who acknowledge the truth of the Bible, indeed all but the downright atheists, are compelled to admit that the circumstances of our present existence are deeply solemn, and that he who shuts his eyes against them is chargeable with gross infatuation. We are here passing the only period of our probation for eternity. The glories of immortal life are brought within our reach, and are suspended in our acceptance of the terms of the gospel. And the very first step towards the acceptance of these terms is serious consideration. It is not manifest, then, that anything which excites a disrelish for reflection, and of course puts at hazard the soul's everlasting interests, must be wrong. If you find that such has been the effect of any amusement in which you have indulged, let it be a reason why you should instantly abandon it. Or if you are convinced that such would be the effect of any to which you are solicited or inclined, let it be a reason why you stand aloof from it, and maintain your ground with unyielding firmness. It were preposterous, moreover, to practice any amusement which you cannot think of without pain or remorse, in connection with the prospect of dying. That death is the certain lot of all, and you yourself, in common with others, is a fact that just as well established as the fact of your existence. That death itself is the most serious event, and that the consequences connected with it are momentous beyond our conception, is no matter of question with any believer in divine revelation. Equally certain is it that the hour of our departure from this world may be rendered the peaceful dawn of an eternal day, or it may be an hour of darkness and aggregation and horror with which the boldest imagination cannot describe. Now I ask again, is it not more than madness to engage in any amusement which conscience tells you will not bear to be reviewed when the current of life is ebbing away, nay, which must inevitably plant a thorn in your dying pillow? Surely no person who acts under the influence of reason can object to this, as a perfectly fair test by which to decide upon the guilt or innocence of any amusement. For no one can deny that it is the dictate of true wisdom that we should consider and prepare for our latter end. Here then I pray you to take counsel of reason, and not suffer yourself to be deluded by mere feeling. And if you are tempted to amuse yourself in any way which you really believe will cast an additional shade upon the dark valley, or the tendency of which is to make you wish that death were more distant, resist the temptation, let it be whatever expense it may. There is no worldly gratification which it were not wise to forego, if it be a seed which will yield a harvest of wretchedness in your last hour. Let me add that you cannot innocently indulge in any amusement which will not fit you for the better discharge of your ordinary duties of life. If this be not the effect, the time which is thus occupied is worse than lost. For not only is there no good accomplished, but the faculties by this means acquired or are confirmed in a wrong direction, and thus habits are often formed, both intellectual and moral, which are alike inconsistent with dignity, happiness, and usefulness. But surely I need not again remind you that, in respect to the improvement of your time and the use of your faculties, you are a steward of God, and that you cannot be indifferent concerning either, but at the expense of proving yourself unfaithful and of incurring the Master's displeasure. Is it not lamentably true that a large part of the amusements that prevail in the world, instead of invigorating the faculties for the more faithful discharge of duty, actually unfit the mind for useful exertion on the one hand, and create disrelish for it on the other? I need not repeat the caution that you will have no communion with any of these scenes of unprofitable indulgence. That you may not misapprehend my meaning, I will descend a little into particulars, and give you my opinion in a few words of some of the fashionable amusements of the day. I will begin with parties of pleasure. You already know that I am in favor of your cultivating the social affections. Instead of objecting to your meeting occasionally a circle of friends for an agreeable interchange of kind sentiments, and for purposes of intellectual and moral improvement, I would encourage such meetings with all my heart, and if you choose to call them parties of pleasure, you have my consent for doing so. But those scenes which usually pass in the world under this name, scenes of our mere conviviality and trifling, in which there is nothing to enlighten the mind, or to refine or elevate the affections, I am constrained to regard as utterly unworthy a rational and accountable being. It is not the fact that occasions to which I refer usually collect a large number that constitutes the grounds of my objection to them, for a large number may as well be occupied in a profitable manner as a small one. But it is the fact that the very purpose for which they come together is to fritter away time in idle and foolish conversation. It is this circumstance which gives to the parties to which I refer their distinctive character. Whether they consist of many or few, their tendency is perhaps equally pernicious. They not only answer no good purpose, but serve to dispensate the mind, and throw open the doors of the heart to every temptation. Another amusement which has been very common, and which still prevails to a considerable extent, is dancing. To this, considered as a mere exercise, no objection certainly can be made, and if it were cultivated with exclusive reference to this, nothing worse could be said of learning to dance, than that it is not the most profitable way of spending time. And I will go further and add that if a few girls were disposed to stand up together for half an hour and dance for recreation, I cannot conceive that there would be any immorality in it. But all this, you are perfectly aware, is very remote from the amusement as it actually exists. Everyone knows that it brings the sexes together in circumstances, to say the least, not the most favorable to the cultivation of female delicacy, and that the mind is usually engrossed for a considerable time in preparation for it, that the most part it occupies hours which the Creator designed should be given to repose, that it is fitted to cherish a spirit of vanity and work up the mind in a feverish and useless excitement, and that it is followed by a state both of mind and body, which for a time at least forbids anything like useful exertion. I am confident that I am I might appeal to any young female who is accustomed to dance at balls and assemblies, and if she were honest, she would confirm from her own experience all that I have said. I have been struck with the fact that in every instance in which I have ever heard a young female under serious impressions speak of that part of her life which she has devoted to this amusement, she has said unhesitatingly that more than anything else it served to confirm her habit of carelessness and to give her an aversion to the concerns of religion. Such testimony rendered in such circumstances ought surely to be regarded as decisive. The only other amusement in relation to which I shall at present offer an opinion is the theatre. The great argument which is urged in favor of this is that it is a school in which you may study to advantage the human character, inasmuch the various operations of the heart under different circumstances are here successfully exhibited. This argument is worth nothing, for it were better to study human nature as it is acted out in everyday realities of life around us, than as it appears in a high-wrought and overstrained representation of the stage. Just as it would be desirable to contemplate any object of interest rather than a picture of it, even though it might be drawn by the most skilful artist. And as for the objections to this amusement, they are so obvious that I scarcely need to allude to them. The vulgarity, the litigiousness, the impiety connected with it, and are proverbial. And if the fact did not stare us in the face, we should say that it was impossible that ladies professing such utmost delicacy, and who in private would be offended by an indecent allusion, will nevertheless deliberately and habitually expose themselves to all the profaneness and ribaldry of the stage, and what renders this still more surprising is that in being present on these occasions, they consent to mingle with the most profligate part of the community, with persons who are at home only in the atmosphere of moral corruption, and whom common decency cannot behold without a blush. I say this is a fact in the history of your sex, for which I own myself utterly unable to account. But I earnestly hope that may never be compelled to contemplate an example of it in my own child. Should this be the case, I should consider my fond hopes in respect to you as blasted, and should shed tears of deeper anguish than if I had consigned you to an early grave. If the thought should occur to you that I am abridging your liberty too far by depriving you of amusements which are regarded by many as innocent, let me entreat you, before indulging such a reflection, to pause and refer the several species of amusement of which I have spoken to the test which I am sure your reason and conscience have already approved. Upon which of them, let me ask, could you, in your closet and upon your knees, humbly invoke the blessings of God? Which of them could you indulge and not feel an increased aversion to the serious concerns of religion, especially to the duty of self-examination and communion with God? In which of them should you be willing to engage, if you were to be assured by a messenger from the invisible world that you were spending the last month or the last week of your probation? In relation to which of them you can say, in the presence of the searcher of the hearts, that it would serve to prepare you for a better, or for you the better, for the various personal and relative duties of life? I am sure that I need only propose these invigorate interrogatories in your conscience, to satisfy that you that there is no superstition in the advice that I have given you in respect to these several amusements. But I know you will ask, if the fashionable amusement of the day is prescribed, what are those in which I may safely and innocently indulge? I answer in general by repeating what I have already said, and that there is scarcely any employment different from your ordinary one which requires comparatively little mental effort, in which you may not find legitimate recreation. You may amuse yourself by various kinds of reading, which at the same time will exert a favorable influence on your understanding and heart. You may amuse yourself by the study of natural science, especially by arranging the flowers of the field and calling them by their names, or by carrying your curious researches into the mineral kingdom, and deciphering the evidences of the Creator's handiwork in the mountain rock. and the insignificant pebble, and every degree of mineral existence between them. You may amuse yourself by a cheerful and yet useful conversation with some entertaining friend, or even by walking abroad in solitude and breathing the fresh air and looking at the moon and the stars as they shine forth in silent grandeur on the face of the sky, or in contemplating the bright verdure that covers the earth in spring, or in listening to the sound of a distant brook as it rushes down a steep mountain and buries itself into a deep forest. The contemplation of these various objects and of all the variety sceneries of nature opens a most legitimate field for amusement, while it is fitted also to enlarge our conceptions of the Creator's work and to foster a spirit of elevated devotion and rational piety. I am your affectionate father.